I've always been creating, and I've never stopped creating. And I do feel like right now, even, when you talk about my influences, um, and the type of music that I enjoy making, I feel like people are getting it now, like they're really understanding it, you know, and uh, and that's why I feel like this is such a cool moment to make music, for myself, because, I'm really not compromising anything for anybody when I'm making music, and the message is still slapping.
I'm Esther Medina, and this is Una Conversación. In today's episode, I'm sitting down with Panamanian Canadian recording artist Fito Blanko. We're celebrating his new EP, Champion Sound, and getting deep about his Panamanian roots. Fito shares how he's reinvented himself time and time again, proving that passion, purpose, and perseverance never go out of style. Fito, welcome to Una Conversación.
Fire.
I'm so happy to have you here.
I know it's been a while, right?
Yeah, and this is long overdue.
Way
This has
overdue.
been actually
years in the making.
Here we are. It's happening.
Here we are. It's happening.
Can you tell us a little bit about where we are right now?
We are at Abstract Studios. This is actually the studio that I recorded my new EP called Champion Sound.
Oh.
So everything that you hear in that project was recorded, mixed, and mastered right here in the studio. So it's kind of like a really cool space, and for us to be doing the interview here right before the EP drops, it's just like, it made sense. I'm like, if we're gonna do this, let's do it here. This is the perfect place for it. I gotta shout out Ante, who's actually here, but let's just pretend, you
Ante.
Ante right there, you can't see him. He's always the man behind the camera or behind the boards. It's been incredible, working the project with him. I wish I could say like we spent like 3 years working on the project and but it wasn't really like that at all. It was the opposite. Like it was like just 4 sessions altogether between the recording, the mixing, and the mastering. And sometimes that's how it is in music, when the chemistry's there, when the vibe is there, everything kind of just flowed very organically. And to be honest with you, it was just a couple months ago when Ante, reached out to me and said, Fito, you realize we have 4 records, that we recorded in the span of the few sessions that we had. He's like, we need to put these records out,
Yes.
And that kind of lit the fire, for us to like, put our energy into putting this project out. And it's been great. Like, people are loving the records. SummerSlam featuring Ram Riddles is already out, and we got the record with Nanu as well.
Fire.
Both of those
Both
records.
Fire.
Yeah, they're both performing well. I'm just excited, to be able to release music and to put music out after so many years.
Well, almost like now you dropping the summer bangers at the end of summer.
Right? I'm trying to extend the summer.
Summer is not over,
exactly.
People.
It's gonna be a hot winter. How about that?
I love
it's
that.
It's gonna be a hot winter.
Hot winter.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, you said something that I'm curious about. You said Ante told you like we need to put these out.
Yeah.
Were you sitting on like what would you say you were waiting for? Like
I sit on music all the time. I really do. Like That's probably one of my biggest flaws because I enjoy making music and I'm constantly making music, right? I'm not going to say that I wanted to sit on these records or that I didn't want to put these records out. I knew they were great records, but sometimes you just need somebody else to kind of like tell you and remind you, be like, hey, we have these records, and one thing is for me to believe in the record, but another thing is like if the whole team believes in the record or if the whole team believes in the project, then that takes the project to the next level, and that kind of energy was just infectious between myself, Ante, and Lucas, who's also a part of this project. We got together and we're like, hey, we're putting these out, right? And everyone was like, absolutely. So, and that's why we're here.
Well, I love that because I think that people don't understand the different kinds of creative processes there are. And when I'm happy to share that and how honest you are about that because I'm the same way. Like I will have an idea that I just ruminate on or like I'll write it down or
I will hope to do it, and then maybe I'll share it with one person I really care about,
Mhm.
and then I forget about it, and they're like, what's happening here? Like, you said
Yeah.
you were going to do this. And like, you know, I think people forget how powerful it is to encourage others. Like, just that little push like goes a long way. And I'm really happy to know you have like amazing people in your camp that are like, hey, just a second, you need
Yeah.
to put this out. And like the fact that they're down, like that's good energy to have. And I feel like that's how good music is made.
And also, another cool thing about this project in particular is the fact that everybody already has worked together,
Oh, that's amazing.
So like, I knew Nanu for many years, and she works out of the studio as well. And that session was super interesting because I got called in just to write with her. It's like, hey, Nanu's coming in. It'd be cool if if you wrote some music for her. You guys collaborated on the writing side. Ended up writing the record, and the record turns out great. But there was like an open verse. The second verse was open, and we're like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? Ante's like, why don't you just get in the mic and just record the second verse, right? And that's how that song came about. I ended up recording the second verse, and Nano and I, even though I had known her for so many years, we had never collaborated. You know,
Mm.
and I felt like this record, brought the best out of both of us. She's still herself in the record, and I'm still myself in the song, and the record is called Adentro. It's definitely 18 plus, letting y'all know right away. It's 18 plus, not for kids, but
Done.
I feel like, yeah, no, for real. And but I feel like that's the energy that she brings, like
Yes.
that's Nanu, and we wanted to capture that. We didn't want to compromise that, and do a song that's romantic. We wanted to do a Nanu record.
Well, I love that you were able to both keep true to yourselves in that track and still like elevate each other in that way, like
Yeah.
almost compliment each other in that way.
She was one of those artists where I hadn't seen her in the studio before. I heard
Mm.
her music, but I hadn't seen her in the studio and her work ethic in the studio. She probably took no longer than like 40 minutes crushing that, and she recorded the entire record within that short amount of time. So I was very impressed by her.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that you can also shine a light on others.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my next question. What is Fito like in the studio? What
Oh,
is your vibe?
we were talking about that right before off camera. I just, I don't know if that's something I can answer. That's like a question for you to ask the producers that I work with.
What do you think you're like?
I don't know. Like, for me, the most important thing is, I think, is the creativity. Like, I need the creative process needs to flow, which is the reason why how this project even came about. We were in this studio originally for a meeting with myself and another artist named Kofi, who's also on the project. He's on this record. We did a song. We needed to take some pictures for our socials together. So Lucas, who A&R that project, said, "Hey, let's connect, and I got a studio, Abstract. Let's connect there, and we'll take the pictures there." That studio session was very impromptu. We take the pictures. Ante gets behind the boards and he starts playing music, and he starts playing the instrumental to Stush, which is the song that is on this project. And he didn't even play it for 10 minutes, and Kofi already had a hook. While Kofi was recording the hook, I was recording the verse. By the time Kofi was done, I had my verse done. And pretty much that song took 35 minutes, 40 minutes max, and that's Ante, working his magic, because he be mixing while he's recording the records, right? But it was great. So I mean, in the studio, sometimes you'll have days that are like that. Sometimes you'll have days that aren't like that. Sometimes you'll have days that it'll take you forever to record a record. You'll have to circle back a few times. But generally speaking, I learned that you kind of have to be ready at all times, because you never know when you're going to have an opportunity, and you got to be ready for that opportunity, right? You can't give yourself the luxury of, oh, I'm having an off day. The one thing that I do have is kind of like a rule is, if I go to the studio, I need to leave the studio with something. I can't leave. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be great, but I need to leave with something, you know? I can't just go to the studio and hang out and not do anything. That's like the only rule that I have, I guess, for myself. And that's what's helped me, be able to get into rooms with other producers and other songwriters and be able to leave with something, because I'm pushing myself even when I'm not inspired, even when I don't have, la musa encima, I'm still, forcing myself to like kind of push through with whatever the mission is.
This is incredibly valuable. And it's funny because when I asked you this question, I felt like you didn't even know how to describe who Fito is in the studio.
Yeah.
You actually off camera had said, oh, the best answer for that question is asking the producers who work with me. But actually, in explaining all that, I know exactly who you are in the studio. You are someone who respects your time, the time of others, the art that you're working on. The fact that you won't leave without something, like, just really shows like your respect for everything it is that you're doing and the collaboration that you're doing with others. I also think that builds a lot of trust, which is why, like, who wouldn't want to work with someone like that?
Yeah.
Like, why waste your time with someone that like doesn't even respect like the time that the little time they might have with that person? I love that so much.
It's super important because, for me, it's if we're in the studio and we're making music and we're focused on making music and creating something, we have to create something. Like, we have to. There's been times where I've been in the studio and I've been there for 4 hours, right? And lightning doesn't strike until the 5th hour. But I won't leave until lightning strikes. Like, it has to strike. And it does. And then when it does, it's like, and then everything else flows easy. So you might be in the studio sometimes, and it might be just a discovery process. Like, if I'm working with a producer that I've never met, maybe it takes 5 hours for me to like understand who he is, to listen to his productions, to like just have a regular conversation with him. When it's time to lock in, the actual song will finish like within 45 minutes, So that's sometimes how it happens. There's really no formula to it. The only thing that I do know is if you walk into a studio, you better leave with something. At least a hook, a chorus, a verse, an idea, a concept, a beat, something.
This respect, this passion, this flow, it has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
You're from Panama, born there.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when you came to Canada?
5.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my thing, right? Because what I can't get over about the fact that you're from Panama. So a close friend of mine, Laura, shout out Laura, I remember she works with me actually, and I was like, I know no Panamanians in Toronto. I swear I think you two might be the only two that I know personally.
Yeah.
And she said something to me. She goes, yeah, I loved Panama. And she's like, now at the state that Panama's in now, like, she's like, most people don't want to leave Panama.
Yeah.
But I feel like when you left Panama, it was a different culture, a different environment.
It was a different era.
Can you talk to me a little bit?
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that era.
I mean, it was crazy. Like, I was born in Panama. My mom's Panamanian, my dad's Panamanian. They were both born in Panama as well. And, growing up in Panama, I thought certain things were normal that, aren't normal. Like, I would walk out in the streets and there was military everywhere. We didn't have police. We had actual military. Rifles, guns were very normal, and I'm not talking about just the regular guns that cops wear. I'm talking about, automatic weapons and stuff, and really did feel like a dictatorship. I didn't know what that meant at the time, because I'm a kid and everything looks normal. But, now that I know a little bit more about life and geopolitics, like, that's the direction that Panama was heading. I was fortunate enough that, my dad had a lot of family in the United States, in Los Angeles and Chicago and New York. And my mom happened to work for Air Panama at the time. So, we did quite a bit of traveling. I, visited the US a bunch of times. My dad at the time was working with the Consul General of the United States. So he would be kind of like a liaison, getting visas for Panamanians that wanted to travel to the U.S. He worked at a agency. This is before the internet. Okay, so people, there was agencies. Like now it's like you go to Jet2 Holiday.
Nothing beats a Jet
to
2 holiday.
But before Jet2 Holiday, you actually literally needed to walk into a brick and mortar location, talk to an agent, and they would figure everything out for you, from booking the hotel to the restaurants. And that's what my dad did. And when things started to get really bad in Panama, let's say around 1988, my dad decided, listen, we got two options. We either go to Los Angeles or we go to Canada. And obviously, they picked Los Angeles. I know you're probably thinking,
Wait, I'm like, wait, but you're here though.
I know. That's the crazy part.
Okay.
They picked Los Angeles. So we ended up going to LA first. And the reason we wanted to go to LA is because my dad had a lot of support there. All of my dad's brothers and sisters were living there at the time, right? So because there was more family support, we thought that that would be a better environment. What we didn't know is that we landed in Inglewood in 1988 in the middle of the crack epidemic. Like it was probably worse than Panama at the time, because
That's wild.
it was crazy. And obviously, like, all of us are immigrants, so we're just struggling. I think about it now and it's crazy. It's just a bunch of 30-year-olds with like 2 or 3 kids, and at 30, you're still trying to figure out life, like
I'm 30.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I couldn't
Relocate.
Children,
Yeah,
learn a new
relocate.
language?
Yeah.
Huh? No.
Exactly. So learn a new language, do all kinds of side jobs to make ends meet. My parents are hard workers, so they had no problems with that aspect, but it was more of the neighborhood. It was more of the schooling system. It was more of the healthcare. Those were really the factors that kind of changed their opinions about moving to LA. So we ended up going back to Panama, packed our bags, and we went to Montreal. Actually, I'm wearing the Montreal hat. It's so funny. I didn't think I was gonna talk about Montreal.
It's in your blood.
Yeah. But
Montreal.
Yeah, shout outs to Meilandia. He gifted this hat to me, by the way. So
I
shout
love
outs to him.
that.
Yeah, he's a Montreal veteran.
Literally though.
Yeah, for real.
He's that guy.
But we ended up in Montreal because my dad went there in 1980 to see a Sugar Ray Leonard fight with Roberto Duran.
That's why.
That's why. That's the only
love
reason,
that.
like zero ties to Canada whatsoever. We had zero family here, nothing.
He's like, I really enjoyed my experience.
Exactly. He ended up coming for the Roberto Duran fight with Sugar Ray Leonard. It was in Montreal in June. It was in June. And my dad's birthday's in June, so he must have had a blast for his birthday.
Truly.
In Montreal.
Yeah.
And at the time, he, like I told you, he used to work with the traveling agencies. So he was the one who was taking care of all the flights, and he was selling all of the tickets for the fight. He's the one who took care of all the Panamanians that traveled to watch that fight, right?
Wow.
And so he had an amazing time. He came for 2 weeks, ended up staying 3. He stayed an extra week. That's how much fun he was having in Montreal.
Oh my gosh.
And he always said, like, if I ever had to leave or move somewhere, I would love to go to Montreal. Mind you, he went to Montreal in June.
I know. I'm scared.
Yeah.
What happened his first winter? Did he regret it all?
He had no idea. He's like, everybody's talking about Canada and how Canada's cold. I've been to Canada. It's not cold in Canada. And mind you, like, winter season in Panama is in June.
Oh my God.
And winter season
so he was like, that must
it's rainy
be winter.
season. Yeah, it's rainy season, like May, June. It's like rainy season in Panama. So he thought, hey, I'm going to Montreal in rainy season, and this is what I get. This is not, like, don't believe the hype. It's not cold.
Wow.
But yeah, and that's how we ended up in Montreal. We ended up in Montreal. They opened up immigration for refugees, for Panamanian refugees, and Canada let us in, and it was supposed to be temporary, but it's a little bit tougher when you got kids. I came with my older brother. He was, I believe he was around 12 or 13 at the time. I was 5.
Mm.
So, so once we started going to school and we started kind of getting used to the life after 2 or 3 years, it's a really difficult decision, like pulling your kids out of the school
Yeah.
system and then starting fresh. And they made that decision, but not to Panama, to Toronto.
Oh my God, they did it again. They did it again.
They did it again.
They're like, we ain't attached to nothing.
Yeah,
Oh
right? They're like, we about this life.
I love that.
We love moving.
I love immigrant stories. I love it so much. And
Yeah.
like I'll share with you, like my parents are from El Salvador. They also came here as refugees in the 80s as well.
I bet they want to go back now.
We went last year on the family trip, and I'm like, yo, so y'all want to stay? It's not so bad.
It's not so bad.
No, I love El Salvador. But to hear this experience that your family went through, and to hear everything that had to happen just a certain way for you to end up here, it's so interesting to me, because if we go back and talk about Panama briefly and how it pertains to music, and I know like people like to debate about the origins of reggaeton and all of that, but like you cannot deny that Spanish reggae comes from Panama and the history of that. I find it so special that like you're from Panama, that history of music and Spanish reggae is like specifically goes back to Panama. So it's like, this music, this Latin music, and like this surge of like reggaeton now, as we love it now, receive it now in its mainstream way now. It's so cool to me that like you come from the land of like some of these origins. Your parents left as trailblazers themselves to like create a better life for you. Now you come here and you create a new path. Like, I don't think you knew back then the path you were building for all the Hispanic Canadian talent to come. And I just want to talk on that because, at what point does a younger Fito Blanko realize, like, actually, I'm into this music thing and I'm going to go for it? And, like, did you even know what you were tapping into at that time? Because back then, like, we weren't, like, I feel like we had, like, Daddy Yankee, but, like, even then, Daddy Yankee wasn't mainstream like that. So, like, how did you get into music? And, like,
it was when I came to Canada, I only spoke Spanish, right? So my aunts and my uncles in Panama, they were in their early 20s. So they were very, very young. So they're in college, going to clubs. They're very, in tune with what's happening in the streets. When I came to Canada, Spanish reggae was already big in Panama. So it wasn't something that happened while I was gone. It was something that I was, as a 5-year-old, when you're 5 and you're surrounded by, pretty much like, college aged uncles and aunts, like that's all you're hearing, in stereo systems, in cars, and Panamanian culture is very loud. It's not like quiet. It's like if you're driving in a cab, especially in the 80s, you had the loudest cab. You know what I mean? Because that's how you would get attention. If you had a loud car, and you're a taxi driver, that's how people know, hey, I need a cab. I'm jumping in this cab because I know it's a cab. So it was almost like a call to, so because of that, there was always music playing, right? And there's Panamanian sound systems. The public transit used to be like school buses, and they used to spray paint the school buses red. And there was no such thing as like organized public transit, right? It was like, if I have money, I buy a bus, I spray paint it red. It is what it is, and I hook up a sound system in it, and I figure out a route,
I love Central America so much.
And that's how it was in the 80s, right?
Yeah,
so what happened is, you take public transit now and you're listening to reggae. You jump in a cab, you're listening to reggae. You go to, una fonda in a corner to go have lunch, and they're listening to reggae, the radio stations. So I grew up with it. Mind you, we were listening to everything else. Merengue was very big, listening to salsa as well, super big. And típico, which is like our vallenato style, cumbia, so that's more traditional music. That's very big too. All of that was popular, but reggae was popular with the teens and with the young adults. That's the music that was really moving, or shaking the system. So I came to Canada already listening and understanding Spanish reggae, because I would listen to Renato, I would listen to Gabi, I would listen to Reggae Sam. There's so many others, like, Jam and Suppose. All of those artists were already very well established in Panama. So when I came here, the best way for me to connect with my Panamanian roots was just my uncles and my aunts. They would send me these tapes, and they would record the tapes on boom boxes, like from the radio. And some of these boom boxes came with microphones, so they would, like, in the microphone be like, "Hey, Fito, we're in Panama." But I'm getting choked up just thinking
No,
about it.
that's so special.
It's crazy. Yeah.
This is deep. You were destined for this.
That's crazy.
It sounds like your family was a very like musical family, whether or not like they actually sang or like used instruments or any of that. Like, you can see how the music united you guys all, even if you weren't all living in the same space. Like, so I'm like thinking to myself, how does a newly emerging Fito then decide, like, oh, I'm gonna do this for real, like I'm going all in on this?
I don't know. I feel like, going back to what we were talking about, like, because I always listened to Latin music, and it wasn't just, reggae. Like, I grew up, my dad is a big salsero. I grew up listening to Hector Lavoe. Actually, that's my son's middle name, Lavoe.
That's fire.
So his name is Lorenzo Lavoe, because I grew up listening to salsa as well, right? It wasn't just reggae, it was merengue as well. So in my family, we were, music was the one thing that connected us to my roots. But more specifically, for me, it was Spanish reggae, and it was not only Spanish reggae, because, I mean, that's what I listened to the most. But then moving to Toronto, that's how I connected with my Jamaican friends, because now I'm not just listening to the Spanish stuff, I'm listening and I'm discovering the English stuff, which I already knew, because in Panama, they go hand in hand. They'd always play the original, and then they would play the Spanish dub.
That's sick.
Because that's how the music came about, right?
Yeah.
So we would dub on instrumentals that were originally from Jamaica. That's how the genre was created, right? And so I was familiar with it, but I became a little bit more in tune, because somehow, Toronto's full of Jamaicans, right? And me being Panamanian, like, I kind of like, what is it? I found my tribe, like my
brother.
I found my musical tribe, with the Jamaicans. So I would go to school, and then I connected with them. That's how, I started learning a little bit more about different artists. But, I was a big Super Cat fan in the early 90s. I was a big, Shabba Ranks fan, Buju Banton, Beanie Man. And if you go even before that, like Ninja Man, Yellow Man, all of the precursors, the people who really laid the foundation for dancehall music, which, in my opinion, really took off in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. And that's when I started making the correlation between the artists that I grew up listening to, like the Renatos and the El General and the Nando Booms. And the connection was, mainly New York. When you really look back at it, the connection between Panamanian reggae and Jamaican reggae, they intersect in New York, you know, through record labels like Shelly Records and record labels like VP Records, who would not only, I don't think they get enough credit for pushing reggaeton and I'm gonna say reggae, not reggaeton, but reggae, enough. Because if it wasn't for record labels like Shelly Records and VP Records, you know, and for them, specifically Shelly Records, if it wasn't for them providing like an organized structure for these Panamanian artists to be heard internationally, you know, maybe reggaeton wouldn't exist because, you know, it
Wow.
wouldn't have gotten to certain places. You know, it wouldn't have gotten to like Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican. You know, it was because of the, you know, that connection, you know. So I'm gonna say like even New York. New York had incredible artists. Not just, you know, they were Panamanian, but they were American. You know,
Yeah.
like Gringo Man is one of them, and you know, like yeah, and he was huge, right? He had massive records. He's from New York. So you know, having that said, there's a lot of people that were a part of this movement, right? But I really started connecting the dots once I started hearing records, you know, like Shabba Ranks' Dembow. And then I'm like, wait a minute, like I know the Spanish version of that, and it's called Dembow, and it's by Nando Boom.
That's
And then
crazy.
yeah, and then back in the day, like now it's like you got Chat GPT, you got Google. Like back in the day, you know, and Ante, you probably know this, right? Back in the day, one of the first things that you did as an artist or as a producer when you got an album was look at the credits. That was like the
Mm.
first thing that you did because you wanted to know who created that sound, who mixed, who mastered. So for me, when I would get a specific record or when I would get like a CD, I would just, you know, I would look at it and I would be like, oh, okay. And then I would look at, you know, the cross reference and then to see if there was matching credits. And a lot of the records had matching credits, right? And that's how I made the connection, you know?
Wow. I see, that's another thing, man. Like you have so much respect for what it is that you do. Like to even take the time to look at the credits to understand that like there's a history there, to hear you speak so eloquently about the history of all of this. Like I just feel like I know there's so many amazing things happening all across Latin America. Even the way like reggaeton has like had this huge
Mm,
surge in Colombia and like,
mm,
you know, we know the history of reggaeton in Puerto Rico, but I feel like the history and the roots of Spanish reggae and reggaeton in general
mm,
isn't spoken on as much in Panama. Like people don't speak on it enough. And I
mm,
love hearing your perspective. I love hearing how your roots, how they tie over into so much of like your Canadian experience, because I'm sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you must feel 100% Panamanian but 100% Canadian, and no one
yeah.
can take that from you.
No, no, no. I'm a 200%er for sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. I
that's
love the
it.
200
I'm an
percenters.
American split sheet.
Too,
Ante
sorry.
got that. You got that.
Yo, we need Auntie up here. We need Auntie up here.
He's like, I'm an
No.
American split sheet.
I'm so done with you
Yeah,
guys. You guys are the best.
yeah.
Fito, listen, you have had an incredible career to date, from VIP, Meneo, Pegaíto. You know, it's also like I will say like even in my research of all of this, I love seeing how you perform in front of a crowd, like that stage presence, like it's not lost on you at all, like from like videos from like a long time ago to like more current day. Like I love that the same energy you're conveying here is like translates in your live performance,
Mhm.
the way you connect with people. Like I am not shocked at all. And to that I say, you know, when you think of that version of Fito that came out with all these bangers, this timeless music that I feel still hits the same way today, like that is very timeless music you created.
Mm.
When you think of that version of you and the version of you now, what do you find that there are differences? Do you still feel very connected to that version of you? Because as an artist, I'm sure you've had to experience reinventing yourself. how do you think of that version of you versus now?
I feel like I've had like maybe 4 careers already.
Stop.
Seriously, like 4 like eras, for real. Cause like there was the era of me finding out who I am or what my voice was. That's like my high school era, you know, up until like I figured out like, hey, this I want to do this, you know, and a lot of that I have to credit Sensei because I met Sensei during that time, so he helped me develop, you know, what became my second era. My second era was when I dropped like higher level, you know, and when I dropped my first album, you know, that whole story is a podcast on its own. I'm telling you right now,
For sure.
of how that came about.
We need a part 2.
Yeah, that was wild. But I was 20 years old when I got signed with Universal, and I was with MRP. Was the label. Universal was the distributor. So imagine walking into Universal in 2003 and saying, "Hey, by the way, I'm a Latin artist and I do Spanish reggae," you know, and reggaeton. Reggaeton was a buzzword that still wasn't used a lot.
Wow.
You know, it was like still bubbling, you know, but it wasn't a word that was common at the time at all, right? So it was very difficult to explain it. We kind of made it happen. Things kind of aligned in a perfect way. I had a lot of help and from a lot of key players in the States and key players here that kind of made that happen. When I created the project, we created the entire project taking 100% of the risk because it was a licensing deal that we had with our label. So back then, you know, it wasn't as easy as it is now to make music, you know, from the comfort of your own home. Like we're recording things on tape, you know, and we're having to bring in musicians and everything is analog. You know, getting in a studio was a bit pricey. We managed to pull it off, you know, and we recorded the first album, Higher Level. And when that came out, I was just over the moon because I knew that my life wasn't going to be the same after that. And it hasn't been, you know, because I fell in love with the process of making music. I fell in love with what came after that, you know, being able to perform the songs. What I didn't imagine was that the songs would perform so badly, you know,
I was
like
not expecting you to say that.
No, that's the part, but that's the
Yeah.
reality. Like I didn't expect for the songs to like completely kind of like just flop. And it was like you're on this high and you think that everything's gonna be great, you know, and then, you know, things are starting, you know, to move. And then we, you know, we put out the first single and it's not doing very well. In the US, it's not doing very well. You know, that was a little bit discouraging, you know. But we were, you know, we're like, hey, listen, maybe we need to put our boots on the ground, you know, and we need to really amp things up. And it all started with a radio station here in Canada, Z103. All the DJs there, DJ Danny D, he played the record and he only played it once. And it was like at a street mix or a drive at 5 type situation. And he gave it one shot and one shot only, you know, and people started calling in.
Wow.
You know, and that changed everything, you know, having that one record. If I'm not mistaken, I think the record was By My Side and people started calling in and requesting the song. And the Latino community was very in tuned at that moment with, you know, Latin music, but this was Latin and it had English on it. And, you know, the youth identified themselves with it because, you know, I'm doing something that was already kind of like beneath the surface, was starting to come up. So it really helped a lot. And, you know, after that, you know, we did the whole radio run across the country. That helped the record pick up even more steam. And by the time the album came out, they underprinted albums. Like they sold out everywhere across the country.
Wow.
They completely sold out. I remember walking into the office and they were mad at themselves for not printing enough records.
Good.
You know, and enough albums. Yeah. you know, just based on what was happening at the time in the US, you know, which was an entirely different market. But I really broke out of Canada. I didn't break out of the US. That was my second run,
Wow.
you know, and the run that you're talking about, the VIPs, the Meneos, that's me breaking into the US as a brand new artist. But I already had experience from what I had gone through with my first album here in Canada, you know? So it's the same thing, you know? I feel the same way now, you know? It's like, I feel like a new artist. It's like, you know, that's why we're doing this. We're doing this because, you know, I'm just as passionate about promoting this project as I was, you know, 20 years ago when I did my first, you know? That's it.
I think that's how you create longevity and
Yeah.
something that'll last after you're gone.
Hmm.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
and keeping it real, because I know that there will be other artists who see, I just know other artists will see this. Y'all better watch this. And I think that the way you keep it real and honest about like, just like, even when you said like it didn't perform the way you thought
Yeah.
that era of your career,
Yeah.
I feel like people need to know that sometimes it's not going to go the way you planned. That doesn't mean that it ends there. Like your
No, it
story's
doesn't.
not over.
And you never know who's watching. Like going back to
Yeah.
what you're saying about this interview, you never know who's watching. I remember when I worked with Drake, when I met Drake for the very first time, he knew who I was, but not because he listened to my music, but because he went to school and there were Spanish people in his school that listened to my music, you know?
Wow.
So, you know, even one of our first interactions was along the lines of that. It's like, hey, all the Spanish girls talk about you in my school, you know? Like that was literally like one of the first interaction I ever had with him, you know? It's because you just never know who's watching and you never know who's listening or who you're inspiring. You know, I posted a video of like a 2005 Latin Fest. It was like my first ever headlining show in Canada, and there was 10,000 people there, and I'm like 22 years old. You know, I'm looking back on it, and I'm like, wow, that is wild. Like, how did that happen? You know, and I remember that day like it was yesterday. You know, we sold out albums, we sold out in merch and everything, and I remember finishing that, and then being like after we did that show, I remember thinking like, we got to go to the studio and make more music.
Spoken like a true goat.
Yeah, it's like this is like we gotta go make more music, right?
Wow.
And we started working right away. We started working on the follow-up project. Like, you know, come to think of it, it's pretty crazy that that happened in Toronto, you know, in a time where, you know, Latinos weren't as connected as they are now, you know, and maybe the amount of Latinos that were here is not the same. Somehow, you know, they always found a way to kind of like get together and celebrate. So, you know, it was just a really cool moment.
I feel like you're going to have many more cool
Mhm.
moments to come. I'm so honored to be with you in a time where you are putting out even more art,
Mhm.
that you're connecting even more artists, that you are just really staying true to like that same new artist Fito
Mhm.
from back in the day. Like he would be so proud of you. I hope you know that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like this is a real moment. It's not like I take everything that I do like or everything that I'm a part of like I want to be a part of cool shit, you know?
Yeah.
And I think everybody that I work with also just wants to be a part of cool shit, you know, and do dope stuff. And,
Yeah.
you know, all we could do is just create and, you know, and see what sticks. But, you know, we do it in a way that makes us feel proud of the things that we are creating, you know, so that, you know, when we look back at it, we're proud of it. Like there's a few projects that I'm extremely proud of that maybe haven't had the success that others have, you know? Like, you know, one of them for me is like Paraíso Nocturno, which is an album that I released 10 years ago, actually, 10 years ago in 2015. And I go back to that project just this weekend. I was listening to it with some of my friends, you know, somebody, you know who you are. He's gonna watch this. Yeah, you know who you are. Comes up to me and says, Fito, do you know this record? I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's my favorite record. I'm like, what? Really? From that project? It's like, yeah, that's my favorite record. I'm like, oh man. It's like, if that came out today, it'd be a banger. I'm like, really? And I respect this person's opinion, right? So we're like, we end up putting the entire album. And as we're listening to the album, we're like, yo, this album sounds like you just recorded it. Like, it sounds like now. I'm like, yeah, the issue was I dropped it when people weren't ready for this shit. It's like the timing was off, The timing was off because when I dropped it, like the record, the album lived, I feel like it lived like in such a unique space that, it may have gone over people's heads, maybe.
Wow.
I don't know. But I listen to it now and I'm like super proud of it. Like, it's like such a vibe. It's crazy because sometimes I'll collaborate with new talent, when they're on their way up. Sometimes I collaborate with talent when, we're both established or, so for me, it's more about the music. If, the artist fits the music, we're going to work, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, where you are in your creative process or where you are in your career. That doesn't matter to me, And that's why I'm really proud of that project. I'm really proud and humbled too, because, like I said, like I'm working with arguably one of the greatest songwriters in, pop music and in R&B. And at the same time, like I'm also working with producers that, are just maybe catching their first or second break, And we all worked on the same project. It's not like those credits are all shared, right? So for me, it's like the success of that project is being able to listen to it 10 years from like removed from it and still being happy with it and being proud with it.
Normalize being proud of your work, no matter how old or new it is. Like, I love that. Thank you for giving a space to that, because like we need to do more of that. I feel like we as humans, we like downplay our success. We downplay something that we love because maybe others didn't receive it the same way.
Mind you, I haven't released a project in, I'm going to say, a long time, like over 7 years, like for real, right? It's a long time.
COVID doesn't count, so.
Yeah, COVID doesn't count. That's 3 years gone.
Right? There you go.
But it's been a long time since I've released music, right? But I've always been creating, and I've never stopped creating. And I do feel like right now, even, when you talk about my influences, and the type of music that I enjoy making, I feel like people are getting it now, like they're really understanding it, and that's why I feel like this is such a cool moment to make music, for myself, because, I'm really not compromising anything for anybody when I'm making music, and the message is still slapping, and the sonics are slapping and the cadences are slapping. Everything is just, working so well, and it took a while to get here, but I'm here.
You're still here, and you're still doing the work.
Absolutely.
And you're making timeless art.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we push for.
I'm excited for you, Fito. Congratulations. Congratulations. Respect. Thank you so much. I want to hear it. Let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, Fito Blanko.
Let's go.
Eso no fue bala. Los piropos como le disparan. Bad vibes como le resbala.